way that diversity is defined within psychology is through the study of both diverse populations and how people respond to increasing diversity within our country, how people perceive what it means for an environment to be diverse, so whether that be numerical representation or one's cultural representation, as well as how shifts in diversity within our country, for example, might be shaping people's attitudes, interactions with one another, and their sort of desire to come into contact with one another. I think being different causes us to have these different interactions with one another because being different is sort of a cue for a number of different things. It could mean that we have differences in terms of the amount of privilege that we have, the history of the groups from which we come, whether they've been stigmatized, social norms and expectations that our groups have. And I think that all of those things come together to influence how we interact with one another. In addition to that, people tend to be more comfortable with and feel less anxious around people who are, more similar to them, whatever that might mean. People who come from multiracial backgrounds are going to be less anxious and less concerned about having the kinds of interracial interactions because they've come from a diverse background and they have sort of a more flexibility around race relative to, monoracial individuals, for example. So that kind of social perspective and previous environment is going to shape how those individuals interact with others. There is a fear of the unknown. If there is, a person who comes from a different group or doesn't look like you, and those cues are not signaling things that are familiar to you, or you think they have different practices, it's going to bring up potentially some fear because you are uncertain about how that person's going to respond to you, how they're going to perceive you, and whether they have the same sort of cultural norms and expectations. So people study the extent to which diversity might sort of help or benefit group interactions, for example. So in problem solving and in coming to decisions, whether the existence of diversity might be beneficial because people are exposed to individuals who come from different viewpoints, as well as the extent to which that diversity might actually prevent people from coming to a strong conclusion together because they're coming from differing standpoints. I also think that people are investigating diversity from the perspective of race and racial diversity, and how racial diversity and changes in racial and ethnic diversity are sort of shifting the way that we view the world, whether it be the fact that the number of multiracial people are increasing or the amount of white individuals are decreasing. I think those are some of the ways in which psychologists in diversity science are studying diversity. So I think one place that the field is going is specifically thinking about how changing diversity is shaping political contexts and the general climate in the country. So Maureen Craig and colleagues are doing a lot of work investigating those kinds of questions about how, if you get people to think about the fact that whites are decreasing and diversity is increasing, how that might impact them psychologically in their voting behaviors and decisions. People like Frank Katchanoff, for example, is investigating how white individuals might perceive people's attempts to shape their culture and their cultural norms, and perhaps how diversity and changes that are happening within our country might serve as sort of a threat to those individuals in terms of these are our cultural norms and expectations in our country, and if diversity increases, might it sort of reshape the narrative of what it means to be an American or what it means to be a white American, for example. I also think a new direction is with multiracial identity and perspective. So multiracial individuals are the largest increasing social or racial group within our country, and there's a lot of new work coming out on how people perceive multiracial individuals as they are increasing, how multiracial individuals might perceive the world differently, and just thinking about diversity more broadly in terms of a continuum among race as opposed to something more categorical. I think through social psychologists studying diversity, I think that they will help us better understand how to sort of deal with diversity, or how to live within a diverse environment and, all function and coexist and hopefully, increase harmony.